Now it's time to bring back my co-host Jeff, as well as our next guest, Dee Carter. Dee is a very good friend of ours in the income generation, and he's president of Carter Financial Group, a retirement income store located in Midland, Texas. Dee is also the Amazon best-selling author of the book, It's Now or Never. Dee, thanks so much for being back with us here.
It's great to be back with you, Dave, and with you too, Jeff. Good to see both of you.
Well, so Dee, tell me, we're doing this show today on Ask Dave. All the questions people have asked me, but what's your number one most common Ask Dee question? When they call into your radio show every Monday morning, what's the most common question you get?
There are two. Actually, there are two. Number one is always what's going to happen to Social Security. I don't think that I've had a show in the last 5 years that someone didn't say, what's going to happen to Social Security regardless of what's going on politically? And the question is a good question. We really don't know. Someone's got to do something about Social Security, but that's number one. People want to know, is Social Security going to be there for me? And at what level? And we try to respond to that as best we possibly can. And the second question is, am I saving enough to retire? And of course, the answer to that is, I don't know. It depends on what your lifestyle is, obviously. So those two questions, am I saving enough? And then is it in the right place? And is Social Security going to be there for me? Those are the two questions I get more than any of the two questions on the radio program.
Yeah, and that second question is a lot tougher, isn't it, Jeff?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, Dee's exactly right. Everybody's situation is different, but it just validates the fact that you have to start saving very early in your life to get ready for retirement, because you're playing the catch-up game. It's kind of like when the stock market falls, you got to wait for your money to get back to break even, and you're playing the catch-up game. But the catch-up game applies to many things. But Dee, one of the biggest concerns I'm hearing today from folks in our business and our clients is they're really, really worried about what's going on with the markets and what's going to happen with this election. And I don't want to talk about politics. I want to be apolitical on that point, but it doesn't change the fact that people are really feeling it today, saying, we don't know what's going to happen. There's uncertainty in the air. And so how are you addressing that with your customers in Texas?
And by the way, Jeff, before you answer that, Dee, I want to tell our viewers and our listeners that we are recording this actually slightly before the election. So Dee, with that in mind, go ahead.
Yeah, I can take it. The main thing that I run into, I've been through several elections. I'm older than either one of you guys. I voted way back in 1964 the first time. So I have watched this thing in my 49 years in this business as to what elections have done to the market. And quite frankly, there's never been more than about a 5% adjustment either way, regardless whether it's Democrat or Republican in the stock market. The people that are in the market now, the market has a tendency to know what's going to take place in advance, and they make arrangements for that. So my situation is simply this: if you are concerned, wait. If you're not, go ahead. But be sure that you find the right place to put it, and that you're doing it for the right reasons. Because a lot of people, especially in today's economy, have no idea about investing for income, so they're throwing the money into things that might hurt them down the road, regardless of who's elected. So it's going to be
don't make any hasty, knee-jerk decisions based upon any election. Is good
exactly.
Words of wisdom. So we need to take a quick commercial break, Dee. We'll be right back in a minute.
Sure.
You stay with us. We have a lot more to come right here on the Income Generation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, here with my good friend and co-host Jeff Small, as well as our good friend and a good friend of the Income Generation, Dee Carter, president of Carter Financial Group, a retirement income store in Midland, Texas. So Dee, let's switch gears just a little bit here, and let's talk about COVID. How has COVID changed how you do business, how your clients react? Talk to us a little bit about that.
That's an interesting question, because we have had to make some changes. Obviously, people aren't as readily available to come into the office to see us like they have in the past. So we've gone to two different ways. I'm doing a lot of face-to-face on the telephone, which I had never done before, but we're doing a lot of face-to-face on the phone with our clientele. I had to get a phone with a bigger screen so I could see it, but we're doing some face-to-face, and we're actually setting up Zoom meetings now with clients for reviews and for first interviews on our computer. It's an interesting concept In fact, even as I'm speaking, Mandy, my associate, my assistant, and my partner in business is on the phone right now, filling out an application for someone that lives 400 miles away that we've never seen. So it's Zoom meetings, it's face-to-face on the telephone, has done a lot of things. We're doing a lot of reviews that way, and it's kind of unique, but we're starting to like it. It's fun to do.
Yeah, it definitely requires a different business skill set, and even for individuals, it's a different personal skill set. Traditionally,
really
people have loved, hiring a financial advisor in person, shaking their hand, looking across the table. But I find that people seem to be getting more comfortable now hiring a financial advisor over the telephone or through Zoom, because it seems like for many that's their only choice with which they feel safe. Are you in concurrent with that, or do you concur with that? I should say, Jeff.
Yeah, I do concur with that, and I think that's kind of Dee's mantra. But Dee, I want to shift gears for a minute here, and I've never had a chance to ask you this, even though I enjoyed reading your book. I'd like you to tell me about your title. How did you figure out the book's name, the book's title? I mean, don't tell me it was an Elvis song. Was it an Elvis song, Dee?
It was an Elvis song, but the whole idea behind that is I was trying to come up with a title and realized I didn't know how to title a book. And books have a tendency to title themselves. And I was in a conversation with the gentleman that was helping me, the editor, and he said, if we don't get things done in financial planning and retirement planning now, we may never get done right. And the book just popped up. It's now or never. If we don't start today, we may never get started as we should. So even though it's the name of a song, and it is an Elvis song, it's one that he made quite famous, it still tells a story. And the subtitle of that book is How to Enjoy Your Life and Not Let Your Investments Own You. And that was the whole premise behind the book, to make sure that everything that you do, you need to start now. You need to do it while the iron is hot, and you need to make sure that your investments don't own you, that you are really in control and know what you're doing, that you know how much money you've got, where it's coming from, and you're going to have a check every month until the day you die, and then pass on to your heirs. That's where the title came from, though.
Well, thank you for telling me that. I've always wondered. Your book was a phenomenal book. It's about twice the size of the book that I read. It's even bigger than Dave's book, or the book that I wrote. It's even bigger than Dave's book, Dee.
That's because I'm older than both of you guys. I've got more history.
He has more collective wisdom. That's the bottom line. So listen, Dee, getting back to the finances for the last 1 minute and 30 seconds we have left, okay, don't overreact with the election. It's always good advice. People tend to make, they think they're going to make huge strategic changes with their investments based upon it, and they shouldn't. But on the other hand, it's now or never. So what's the New Year's resolution that you think people should be considering for part of the income generation as we near the end of 2020?
That's a great question, and the resolution that we're trying to get across to people is, if you haven't started, it doesn't matter how old you are, what your economic status is. If you haven't started doing something for planning down the road, now is the time to do it. And your New Year's resolution ought to be to decide what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and with whom, and get started January the 1st, if not before, on planning for what you want to do when you retire. You don't have to retire. You really don't. I'm not retired. I'm well past retirement age, but I love what I do. But you need to plan like you're going to, in case something happens health-wise or otherwise that would make you do so. So your New Year's resolution is simply this: get started now. Get started planning. Regardless of your age, regardless of what your situation is, get started now. Decide how much you can put away, how you're going to do it, where you're going to put it, and stick with it. That's the New Year's resolution that I'm telling my clients.
Great advice, Dee, and I'd add to that too. If you're part of the income generation, if you haven't already, it's never too late to start making that transition from growth to income philosophically when it comes to your investments. Dee, thanks so much for being back with us. We really do appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
You stay with us too. We have much more coming up on the income generation. We'll be back in a minute.